My name is Mandi Cruz. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the American Society for Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics. ASHI is the acronym for that long title. That stands for a membership society of transplant directors and bench technologists that do the matching part of transplant. Before that role, I spent about 10 to 12 years in youth homeless services, mostly in Camden County, connecting them to supportive services, mental health services, and supportive housing. Covenant House started a day service center in Camden, New Jersey, and here is a news article of our time there. Here in this picture, you'll see the front of our day service center with a pastoral minister. He was very instrumental to our outreach efforts there. And then here you'll see us networking with people in the community and trying to find homeless youth around the transportation center hub in Camden as well. Foster care is an interesting dynamic for homeless youth in general, because typically when you're in foster care, you're there for a reason. It's because of some sort of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect that you've had in the home, and so you were placed into this foster care environment as a positive resource. However, once those financial stipends run out, and the child turns 18 and those foster parents no longer are eligible for those financial incentives, those kids are typically thrown to the street with no identification, no network to help them. And it is a really unfortunate disadvantage for these young people. Imagine being 18 and being considered an adult, however, not really having the independence or the resources or even the life skills to maintain adulthood and become independent. So some of the challenges involved with these kids are not being stabilized in their mental health because they're not on medication. With a foster family, perhaps they were able to make appointments for doctors. They were able to sustain a living environment that was conducive to them taking daily medication. And without that healthy living environment and being on the street, they turn to substance abuse. They turn to sex work. They turn to whatever survival skills that they need to adapt in order to survive in that environment. And so the challenges that are presented are, number one, them admitting that they do have an issue with mental health so that they can get the support services that they need, and number two, having access to those services as well. So as a coordinator for a day service center in Camden, we focused on more of the immediate needs that homeless young people face. So first, we had to identify who these young people were. We would do street outreach, so that included meeting young people at the bus stations, doing presentations in the community to see if perhaps there were young kids couch surfing, and seeing who needed our help, networking with other community supports, going into tent cities, going into abandoned buildings sometimes to identify where these young people were, and then using those community supports again just to help us identify who they were. And once we identified them, we focused on meeting their basic needs. At the day service center, it was all about feeding them. It was about providing them clothing and providing them whatever it is that they needed to just dignify them as humans. I think one of the issues we have in the society is that we walk by homeless people as if they don't exist, and we just ignore them. And so part of our job was to just dignify them as human beings, from one human to another, to say, you are worthy of these services, you are worthy to have food and shelter. And then once we built that rapport, then we could take the next step and start talking to them about their mental health, to talk to them about how identifying or getting their identifying documents was important to stabilize education, job services, and things of that nature. But the very first part of our job was to meet their immediate needs. So while our country has done really great strides with bringing awareness to mental health, I feel like the medical institutions and facilities have a lot more work to do. If I have a pretty decent income and I have insurance, health insurance, But still, it is a financial burden to see a therapist if I'm experiencing any type of depression or anxiety. It could cost upwards of maybe $50 to $75 per visit. And most therapists are asking to visit, maybe 2 times a week. And so now imagine that you're a young person who's 18 years old with no employment, no ID, no financial means at all, no access to parentals who can pay for these things for you. Not only can you not afford those therapist payments, but you can't afford the medications that go along with it. You're impatient to sit through an assessment that probably takes 3 hours for them to evaluate what your mental health issues are. And furthermore, to get the appointment in the first place, you could face 6 months, 8 months, up to a year waiting list just to be seen. So oftentimes what we see with our young people on the street is that they'll turn to drugs because that is an instant gratification for them that they can get at a very low cost. Why spend $75 on an assessment or on an appointment when I can buy $10 from my drug dealer down the street and still get the relief and instant gratification that I need? So we're definitely seeing a lot of young people who are turning to substance abuse just because of the barriers that they have to healthcare.
Managing my mental health is not easy. Coming from a first-generation family that does not believe in mental health disorders or any sort of ailments whatsoever, it's very difficult to find resources and help. It's something that you have to do on your own, and you can't really go to your family for these kind of things. I wasn't even diagnosed basically until college, and even when I did bring it to my parents, they were like, "Oh, you're fine. It's just like, it's a societal thing. Like, you're just trying to put a label on yourself." But once I learned like what my issues really were, like with anxiety, depression, and ADHD, I learned that it was a way to manage it better without medication. Luckily for me, my experience with the therapist wasn't too terrible. The only thing that was terrible was the cost. Health insurance doesn't cover therapy as much as they should. It still costs an arm and a leg out of pocket, and it's hard enough just to even get an appointment with a therapist that will cover you.